Hi guys, it's Davin here at Brewbitz.com. Behind the camera as usual we've got James. Say hello James. Today I thought we would show you how to brew up our mango pale ale. And this is slightly different from a normal beer kit. This is an all grain beer kit and slightly different to most usual all grain beer kits. This doesn't boil the wort. So first of all, let's show you what the mango pale ale is about. It uses real mangoes, it's a pale ale, it's juicy, it's tropical. Whoop, this one's very, very, very lively. And so, wow, look at the head on that, that is really lively. But it's got a good, even the foam is gorgeous. If you like your craft beer, if you like things like Mango-licious and other mango beers, you're going to like this because it's quite easy to brew at home yourself. And once you get through the froth, trust me, that's a really, really nice beer. So, let's get that back on. In our kit to brew a mango pale ale are going to be your ingredients. So first of all, you've got your instructions, because our instructions for brewing this kit, back to me a second, James, because I said it's a no boil kit, and it means we're not going to be boiling the wort. The method is going to be slightly different than potentially what you may have used before if you brewed your own beer from grain. So we've got a couple of hops, bags of hops. We've got a bag of some priming sugar. We've got a sachet of yeast. And we've got, let's get rid of the box, 2 bags of grain, all mixed up, ready to go. So what are you going to need to get to be able to brew this beer? So because we don't know when you're going to be making it, you're going to need to go out and buy yourself 1.5 kilos of mangoes. And mangoes, absolutely lush fruit you can get in the supermarket. If you've never used a mango before, don't worry, we'll show you how you're going to peel them, cut them, get the fruit out. But you want really, really ripe mangoes. So back to me a second, James. When you get your kit, it says you're not going to be using the mangoes till day 4. But buy them now. Buy them at the beginning when you're about to start the whole brewing process. Because when you get them from the supermarket, they can be a little bit too firm. So what I like to do is buy them from the supermarket a few days before, pop them in a little bowl like that, and pop them on a south-facing windowsill with the gorgeous sun, so they ripen off in those 4 days. Now there's a fair few different types of mangoes available in the UK. I've got these sort here. Sometimes it might be all bright yellow, they might be a bit more orange, they might have yellow patches on, they might have red patches on. Just buy the ones that are available to you. They're all very similar, but they do have slightly different variants of flavour. So now we've got our ingredients, put them to one side. What are you going to need to be able to brew this beer? Well, to start off with, because we're going to be mashing the grain, we are going to need a stock pot. And this stock pot here is about 13 litres. So ideally a 13 litre stock pot. I've got a big colander, a spoon, it's a stainless steel spoon on this occasion, but if you've got a long plastic spoon, great. You're going to need a thermometer. You're also going to need a couple of these bags. So this is just a straining bag. I'll pop that in there for the moment. And this one is called, I know it looks like my granny's knickers, but it's not, I can assure you. This is called a Sparging bag, and it's got 2 different grades. Come on in tightly, James, you can see it's got 2 different grades of mesh, a fine grade and a coarse grade, and we'll show you what to do with that in a moment. A measuring jug, a very sharp knife to chop our mangoes. You're going to need your trial jar and your hydrometer. And then once we've done all of that, we're then going to need a brewing bucket, siphon, and some bottles to bottle it off into once it's all finished fermenting. We're going to need 9 pints of boiling water. So the first thing I'm going to do is fill the kettle up pop it on to boil. Whilst I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, I'm going to prepare my stock pot. And here I'm taking the mashing bag, which is the big bag with the two variations of mesh. It's got a drawstring in it. So I'm just going to take it around the edge like this. And very easily, ooh, what am I doing? I'm going to tie it in a little bow. So all nicely down on the inside of there. I'm just going to pop it on the hob ready. Just poured the 9 pints of boiling water in there. And now I'm going to use 3 pints of cold tap water. And that's the 3 pints of cold tap water. So now we need to give it a stir and mix our waters together. I'm just using a lid to help keep the heat in. And we're going to take our thermometer and dip it now in the water. And we're looking to try and get it to a temperature of 70 degrees. This is what we call our strike water temperature. And if we find it's going to be a little bit low, then we can turn the heat on. Okay, I'm going to need to add a tiny bit of heat on to bring it up to 70 degrees, but it won't take long. It'll only take 30 seconds to a minute to get it up there. Now we've got our temperature of the water to 70 degrees. We can take our bags of grain. You may find you've got 1 bag or 2 bags. It depends how it's been packaged up. But if you've got 2 bags, use 2 bags. If you've got 1, just use the 1. Careful as you're opening it. And we're going to gently pour the grain in. Now, little tip that you'll get is that as it's pouring in, gradually stir the grain and the water together. Otherwise, if you just dump it all in one go, what you can find is the grain clumps together in a solid ball, and you end up with what's known as a dough ball, and you don't then get a very good mix, and they don't get a very good mash. So in goes the second bag. And the smell is lush already at this stage. All the malt and the different malts and grains that are in there is actually making that smell lush. Right, so a good stir around, mix it all in. Remember, you've got the bag in there as well, so be careful, your spoon will catch on the bag if you're not careful. Now we've got our grain into our water, we need to check the temperature is at 65 degrees. And I can tell you this is coming out pretty much exactly as we want it. So this is now going to mash at 65 degrees for a whole hour. But we need to make sure it stays at 65 degrees for that hour. So about every 10-15 minutes we need to come back, give it a good stir, a thorough stirring all the way around, and we're going to check the temperature again. But for now, I'm going to pop the lid on and I'm going to leave it for 15 minutes and come back in a bit. Take a note of the time. So in the mash, a process is going on that started due to Warminster maltings taking the barley from the farmer and causing the seed to germinate. And in that process, that germination created an enzyme, and in that enzyme started turning the starches in the grain to sugar. And that sugar, the grain used to create a root so that it could start to grow. Warminster maltings then turned up the heat and they killed the grain off. But that enzyme still lives on in the grain. And what's happening now in here is that enzyme's come back into being, and that enzyme started the process again of turning those starches in the grain to sugar. And that is what's going to create a lovely sugary sweet liquid that our yeast are then going to munch on those sugars a little bit later in the process and turn it to alcohol. So that is what's happening inside that pot right now. It's been 15 minutes since we started the mash. And the smell is great already when you take that lid off. So we're going to give it a good stir. Make sure all the water and all the mash, and just be careful that you don't catch the bag like I've just done there a couple of times. Right, get a good stir going on. Lovely, and now let's get our temperature gauge in and see where we're coming up to. Remember, we want it to be at 65 degrees. Takes a little bit of time to get there. "61, 62. Sometimes give it a wiggle. 63, so we're not far off. Okay, it's taken a bit of time to get up to 64. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce a small amount of heat to it. So I'm going to turn my electric hob on. If you've got an induction hob, obviously brilliant. Your gas one, if you're using a gas hob, just be a bit careful of the mashing back. You don't catch it alight. Doesn't take very long. About 30 seconds is usually long enough to whack some heat in. Remember, you can always add more heat if it's not quite there. You can't take heat out if you've added too much. And we want it to be as close to 65 as possible. So once we've added our few seconds of heat, we're then going to give it a really good stir again. And we're going to take our temperature again. Okay, it takes a couple of moments to do this. Don't rush it. Remember, if you're using an electric hob, there will still be heat in the hob as well, and that will gradually add to it. So it's getting up there. Come on. Cool, right, I need to add a little bit more. And I'm going to keep doing that until I reach 65 degrees. And as soon as I reach 65 degrees again, I'm going to put my timer on for another 15 minutes. And keep doing that until the hour is over. So it's been another 15 minutes. So our wort, or our mash, I suppose, it's another really good stir. Whoops, careful not to splash it on yourself, but it's only 65 degrees, so it's not going to be that bad. And it's going to take a little bit of time to get up to temperature. Make sure you stir right the way to the bottom. Lovely. That is still coming out at pretty much 65, so I'm not going to add any heat this time, but I'm going to set my timer for another 15 minutes and come back for the last check. So this is our last temperature check, and it's a little bit low. It's dropped a couple of degrees there, so I'm going to turn our heat on and I'm going to put a little bit of heat back into it. So again, just like last time, give it about a 30-second shot of heat, turn it off, give it a good stirring, check the temperature. If it needs a bit extra, give it a bit extra. But again, do it in small little snippets, because if you add too much heat and you go over 70 degrees, you can actually destroy the enzyme that's actually doing all the hard work for us. And if you do that, you get no sugary liquid. So, I've added my heat on. And give it another stir until we get it back up to 65 degrees. Our 60 minutes is nearly up, so I'm going to take the opportunity to prepare our straining bag. And all I'm going to do here is I've sterilised the straining bag, which is why it's wet. So I'm going to take pack of hops 1, open that up, and pour it in. So these are the hops that are going to add the bitterness to the beer, but you don't want a huge amount of bitterness in the beer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create it like that. That's our hop tea bag, I suppose. And now I've done that, and whilst I've still got a few minutes left to go, I'm going to get prepared and I'm going to put the kettle on to boil. Our grains have been mashing away in our water now for a good hour, and pretty much all the starches in there will have now turned to sugar. So what we need to do now is, this is why we only tied it in a little bow. It's because we need to take it out, and the good thing is you can pull them together and you can get a nice tight pot so you don't lose everything. Now, of course, the water's hot, so we're going to raise it up, and lots and lots and lots of water is going to come out the bottom. And now we're just going to lay our colander underneath. Now my stock pot here, back to me a second James, we're going to now need to sparge this and rinse the grains by pouring more water, and what will happen is the level of water in this pan will get a little bit too high. So I need to make a slight amendment. This is quite heavy. So I'm just using a clean rack from the oven that I put through the dishwasher, and now that sits in between our stock pot and our colander. The next thing we need to do is we need to take our bag of hops, and our bag of hops, come around here a second James, and you'll see I'm just going to lower it in nice and gently, and then get the spoon in there and get that moving around. So the hops now are going to add the bitterness to the wort, and what we now need to do with our kettles of water that we put on earlier is to rinse our grains. So I'm going to pour off a pint of water from my freshly boiled kettle. Where's my pint mark? I've lost my pint mark. Where's the pint mark gone? There it is. We're going to very, very slowly dribble it all the way across the grains. Now this pint ideally should take you about a minute to dribble. Don't rush it, just let it do its thing. And as you can hear underneath, the water is running through, so don't do it either when you're in need of the toilet, because otherwise you'll be crossing your legs and jiggling around like a good one. So this is pint number 1. We're going to need to do this 8 pints in total. So take your time, no rush, the longer you take the better. And what we're doing here, just to recap, is we're rinsing the grains and making sure all the sugary goodness that's in the grains is ending up in our pan in the bottom. Now once we've finished our first pint, and each time we finish a pint, we're going to try and get our spoon in, and we're going to give it a little stir. What that's going to do is that's going to help the hops, back to me a second James, that's going to help the hops moving around in there and allowing them to impart their acids and their bitterness into the wort as we go. So that's pint number 1. I've got 7 more pints to go. So this is the last few dribbles of my 8 pints. There we go. That's going to dribble away for a little bit of time now. If you really want to, feel free to press it down and help it. You're more than welcome to. But I'm now going to leave this for 5 minutes just to finish dripping through. Our grains have finished dripping, so I'm just going to pop them in a bowl there. You don't need that anymore, so get rid of that. So what we need to do now with our wort, in a normal beer brewing process, we would now boil the hell out of it for an hour. But we're not going to do that. We're going to pop the lid on. We're going to bring it over to the sink. Where I'm going to pop my plug in. And there it goes. Now, I'm going to put some cold water in. And we're going to cool this down to 20 degrees C. And the way I'm going to do it is by putting cold water in the sink around the pan, and just going to let it gently, slowly run down the overflow which I've got over in here. Alternative ways of doing this, you could put this into a bucket and put loads and loads of ice around it, or if you've got a wort chiller, then you can pop that in it and run that. Whatever your setup is, if you've got a really good setup for doing it, then all you're looking to do now is cool the wort down to 20 degrees C. It's taken a little while for our wort to cool down, and I've taken a temperature reading and it's beautifully coming out at 20 degrees C. Look at that. So in here we have our bag of hops, and our hops in here have soaked up quite a lot of this wort, and so is the bag, but we want to try and get as much of it as possible back, so we just give it a good squeeze. I've cleaned my hands, by the way. And there we go. Right, let's move that to one side because I'm going to now lift this out. We can let the water out. Before I forget, undo your knot of your straining bag, dispose of your hops, and then clean your straining bag because we'll be needing this again in a few days' time. Right, I have taken a sample of the wort from the pot in my trial jar, and the SG readings coming out at 1.044. Perfect. Take a note of your reading and put the date as well. Let's not waste any of this though, because we've sterilised all of this. So that's straight back in. The next thing we're going to be looking at doing is taking our sterilised bucket and our sterilised siphon and siphoning the beer from the stock pot and into our fermenting vessel. So in it goes. Good start to get it flowing. And it'll take a couple of moments to siphon through. So inside the bottom of the stock pot, you can see as it's getting down and down and down and down and down, there's quite a bit of sediment. There we go, and that's all your bits of grain and hops that were left over. And I know right now it looks more like the water in the River Severn, but trust me, in a short period of time, it's going to look like that. Not far off actually already. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is add our sachet of yeast, and this is a craft beer yeast that's going to give it some real lovely zings. It's going to help pull out those hop flavours, and all we're going to do is literally just sprinkle it on the top. Not even going to bother stirring it in, and there is a lid around somewhere. Misplaced that, but all I'm going to do now is pop the lid on the top, and that's going to go into my warm cupboard at 18 to 22 degrees C, and then we'll come back in a few days and we'll show you what we're doing with the mango. Our beer has been brewing in our fermenting bucket now for 4 days. Now come on in, James, and have a quick look at this, because I've just realised something. I need to chop my mangoes up and put them in my bucket, and I've realised, back to me a second, James, I've used the wrong bucket because I'm not going to have enough space in that bucket to put all the beer and all the mangoes in. So very, very quickly, I'm going to transfer it to a slightly bigger bucket. Now I've got my beer in a suitable bucket, it's time to move on and prepare the mangoes. So remember I said you need to get 1.5 kilos of mangoes from the supermarket, and ideally get them nice and early. And now when you fill them, they're a little bit, I can't really show this on, oh you can, get on here, just look here. You can see that when I squeeze it, hopefully you can see that it moves. So we now know they're beautifully ripe. Okay, so let's cut into a mango. So if you've never cut into a mango before, we need to hold it fat-wise, thin-wise. Now in the middle here, there's a stone that runs vertically, and it's a very, very flat stone. Imagine putting your fingers in the middle like that. So we need to take a really, really sharp knife, and down one side of the fat stone is about a good finger's width thick. You'll feel it as you start cutting through. So as I'm hitting it there, So you just turn it round and then follow the stone over. You are going to get mucky hands when cutting a mango. And look at that gorgeous red, orange flesh. So, other side. It does take a bit of feeling to find out where that stone is. There we go. So that's part one of the mango. Part two is be very, very, very gentle with our sharp knife. Score some straight lines in it, but not so hard that you go through. You'll feel the knife just touching the inside of the skin. And if you've never done this before, we've got a hedgehog. There's a lot of mango fruits around the stone as well. So you can take all this off. And we're going to be shoving all of this into a food processor anyway, so you don't need to make it look neat and pretty. If you find you've got a little area here that's obviously a little bit overripe, try not to use that. Just use the really good mango. Now, if you wanted to use mango pulp that you can get in tins or cartons, you can use that as well. And it's, as I say, it's a little bit of a mucky process. And that's your stone. We can save the insides of this as well because we want as much mango as possible. Minus the very bad bit. Okay, now to get these little cubes off, we simply run the sharp knife with them stuck up against the skin, and they literally just fall off. Easy as that. And you can see there I went a little bit too far with the knife on that one cut. There we go. And if you're feeling a little bit sneaky and you fancy trying a bit of mango, then pop a piece in. It's blooming delicious. As you can see, we finished chopping up our mangoes and we've got a load of stones and skin, so we don't need those. It is a little bit of a messy job, but the next part of it is we need to get this into a pulp. Now, you could use a potato masher. I'm going to use a food processor. And in it goes, and then a quick short blast. It doesn't take long to turn it into this lovely, beautiful pulp. But that's ideally the consistency we're looking for. Cool. So, the next thing we're going to do is going to open up our fermenting bucket. And we're going to gently pour our mango in. Now there's sugar in mango, believe it or not, that's what makes it lovely and sweet. And this is going to add extra alcohol to our beer. The yeast are going to love this sugar and they're going to munch away at this over the next couple of days, and they're going to turn all the extra sugar in those mangoes into alcohol. You can see it already starting off. As soon as it's gone in, the yeast in here are starting to munch on these sugars. Give it a nice little gentle stir. It smells good. Lid goes back on and back into our warm cupboard at 20 degrees C for another 3 days. In my pan down here, James, I have got my straining bag, and I've got that in a small amount of water with some sterilising solution, because this straining bag is going to be going into our beer, and it's been boiling away in there for about a minute. So I'm just going to use some cold water to cool it down. Because come on in, James, and have a look at this. So the mangoes have been fermenting in our bucket now for a few days, and they've all kind of done their thing. The smell is great. It's the smell of beer and mangoes. It's lush. So it's time now to add our packet of hops. So this is hops 2. And all I'm going to do is cut open hops 2. Prepare my straining bag. And pour the contents of hops 2 in. They might be a bit stuck together, so just work them out. Okay. And just like we did previously with the straining bag, we're going to tie it into a knot so it acts like a tea bag. If they're a bit clumped up, then just break them up in the bag. And all we're going to do now is just pop it in there, work it in. Okay, and now I'm going to put the lid of our bucket back on. And this now goes back into my warm place at 20 degrees C for another 24 hours. The yeast are actually going to work on those hops, and those hop pellets are now all going to break up and basically fill that bag, and the yeast are going to work on the flavours inside those hop pellets and actually draw them out and into the beer. So let's see what happens, or what it's going to look like in 24 hours. Our Mango Pale Ale is now 8 days old. And I've taken a measurement with our trial jar, and it's coming out at 1.006. So it's going to come out below 1.010 as in the instructions, because we've added in the mangoes. Now, as long as it comes out below that, you're ready to move on. And it is, so we are. So come on in, James, and have a look at this. Because in here, we have got our hop bag floating around quite nicely, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this out, and it's going to give it a little squeeze and get this beer that's in it out. Okay, now the reason why I want to do that is I'm just going to come over here, James, back to me. I'm going to try and undo this for the next stage. In here, as you saw floating around, is a lot of mango pulp. Now, fingers crossed, most of it should have settled down to the bottom, but as we siphon, it's likely we're going to get some more in. And secondly, if you're lucky enough in your fermentation vessel to be able to agitate your hops for the last 24 hours, fantastic. Some people have got recirculation machines so that they can get all the flavours of the hops in. One of the other ways that I like to get extra flavours from the hops in is when we use our siphon, is to run it through the hops. Now, so that I can get everything ready, so I can get the flow going, I'm just going to clip it to the side here. In my siphon goes, and a quick suck, and then down, and let it run through the hops. I finished the siphon, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of yeast sediment, and there's mixed in with the mango. And all that's got siphoned down through. If you come on in again, James, you'll notice that my straining bag is quite full of lots and lots and lots of mango pulp and all the hops again. So just gently give it some squeeze to extract all that lovely beer that's stuck in there. We're only making a 9 litre kit, so we're going to try and rescue as much beer as possible. Next, it's time for the priming sugar, and we've measured this out so that you get a nice good fizz. And then give it a very gentle stir in. This is brewing sugar, so it dissolves very, very quickly. And the colour on this is fantastic already. Right, I'm going to bring my bucket up because we're ready for bottling. So here I'm using just 500ml brown bottles, and I've already prepared my siphon tube, and I've got the little tap on the end. If you've got a bottling system, like a little bottler or something like that, that'll be brilliant. Otherwise, try and run the beer down the side of the bottle. These styles of beers, ideally, you want to try and keep as much air, oxygen away from the beer as possible. So I've actually purged these bottles, and I purged the buckets before I did my siphoning and transferring from one to the other with carbon dioxide. So if you can do that, fantastic. And you'll then end up with the beer, that fantastic yellowy golden straw colour. And it will also help it taste fan-bloody-tastic. Our beer's been bottled, and all we have to do now is put this into our warm place for another 48 hours to allow the secondary fermentation to occur and for the fizz to start being made inside of it. Then transfer to somewhere nice and cool and leave it for a good 2 weeks for it to start to settle out and become very, very nice and drinkable. This one here that I made about just over a month ago, absolutely delicious, fruity, mango-y, very nice pale ale with a good level of bitterness, very easily drinking, and fingers crossed, these guys will all come out exactly the same. So there you go. Have a go at brewing our Brewbitz no boil mango pale ale all grain beer kit, and then write in the comments down below and let us know how you got on brewing it. Cheers for now, and happy brewing and happy mango pale ale.